he was wrongfully convicted of murdering his mother back in 1989, and he is now exonerated. It's a really powerful story. Let's bring him on. Huwe Burton, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How you feeling?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Your
Great.
story just blew my mind. I've been doing this for a while, and it's such
Yeah.
an intense story. But I want to start here. I always start here. I think it's important to give some context before these tragedies happen.
Mhm.
Tell me the young teenager you were living in New York at 15 years old. Just tell me the kind of kid that you were.
So for me, the 16-year-old, um, just one that loves life, raised by a strong family, mother and father, always present, strong extended family. My love of music is what carried me through a lot of the 80s, as it did many kids in the Bronx. Um, my love of school, not so much. By the time I had gotten to high school, school hadn't really got kept me enthused. So music was the only thing that kept me going as a child. So just being a regular kid and just loving music.
Who were your favorite groups or artists at the time?
Oh wow. So at the time, I mean, I had Rakim, I had Kane,
Mm.
I had Cool G Rap, I had KRS. I mean, everybody from the day, from my childhood, from say 86 to about 93.
Yeah, that was a man. That was a great time for.
What a
I
time.
mean,
Yeah, right.
you know,
It really
it was
was.
it was a great time. It
Yeah.
was a great time. All right. That said, you're 16 years old. It's January of 1989.
Mhm,
You come home from school and you see your mother has been stabbed to death.
mhm.
And after that, and I could only imagine what that's like as a baby, a child, a teenager, seeing that. And then shortly after that, the police are after you. I believe there's 5 days or so later, you end up being interrogated because they want you to come down for a polygraph test. Is that correct?
That is correct. However, the only thing that wasn't was that it was 48 hours after
48
this happened.
hours.
48 hours.
Wow.
So I'm still at the time that they told me that they wanted me to come down to the precinct. I was at a my godmother's house in Mount Vernon. I wasn't able to eat. I couldn't sleep. I would sleep in like 10, 15-minute intervals. So by the time that they came to say that they wanted to bring me down just for a polygraph test, I was exhausted. I didn't know what was up from down. So, and again, still trying to process the last image that I saw. So I'm walking into the precinct thinking that I'm getting a polygraph test, but I'm being brought in there as a suspect. So,
Yeah, I just can't, I've covered a lot of these stories as well too, where they take advantage of vulnerable young people. I mean, I can't imagine, with your mother, what you must be going through. You go to the precinct, and like you said, you're going for a polygraph test. And do I have this right? You get there at 5 p.m., and then at 3 a.m., that's when they start recording. Hours and
that's
hours of interrogating you. Then at 3 a.m., they start recording. What's happening? That just sounds like torture. That just sounds
mhm,
inhumane. So,
mhm.
what's happening at 5 p.m.? What are they doing to you? What are they saying to you?
Well, when we got back into the precinct, they asked me to, tell them again what I told them on the third. My event set from the morning of the third, and they asked me tell them it again. So I told them it, and maybe about hour, 2 hours into that, they told me that they knew I was lying, and that I should tell them the truth, um, and that they knew that I am the one who killed my mom. So immediately I'm crying. I'm terrified at this point because now this is another emotion that I'm unable to process. I'm still trying to process what I just saw, and now 48 hours later, you're telling me, and you're the one who did it. So I'm crying and I'm asking for my father, and they're telling me, well, when you let us know what we need to know, you'll be able to see your father. So this back and forth, this exchange, this all goes on for a while, for hours. And at that point, they told me, well, we knew that earlier in the day, that day you had gone to your a girlfriend's house, but you know, what you may not know is that you're 16 and she's 13. What that constitutes is statutory rape. I had never been in police custody. I had never been questioned by police. I knew nothing. So they gave me this ultimatum that if I didn't, tell them that not only would I go to prison for the murder of my mom, but I would also go to prison for statutory rape as well. But if I told them that, well, I indeed committed the crime, they would make sure that I wouldn't go to prison for this rape charge, and that my dad would be able to come and pick me up from family court because we know that this was an accident, it was a mistake. Um, so again, this goes on for a while. When they finally got me to a point where they made me feel as if there was nowhere else I was going to go. I couldn't go anywhere, and the only way out of this room was to do as they asked. Um, when they finally got to that point, it took them so long to kind of formulate what this story was going to be in order to make it make sense. So thus, the long period of time, and then eventually the videotaping at 10 after 3 in the morning the following day.
And I want to remind people that this happens in January of 1989. Your mother was killed January 3rd, 1989.
Yeah,
Uh, 3 or 4 months later, the same thing happens to the Central Park Five in New York City.
yeah,
What you just described, they're being interrogated for hours and hours. Then the police decide when they're ready to turn the camera on and basically force these young people, like what happened to you, to
right.
tell the story. I don't even know if you could answer this, Mr. Burton, but do
Mhm.
you have any idea why they said we're going to make him, this child, the uh the uh the the killer? Why did they do this? Do you have any idea?
What's very interesting about that, I spent a long time asking myself the same question, like, when did when did I become why? When did I become a suspect? Why? And I learned that when they went to school to, I guess, retrace follow up on everything that I said, my whereabouts for that day. Um, Initially, my homeroom teacher, when they asked her, she looked at her book and said, "No, he wasn't here." So in their mind, well, if he's lying about going directly to school, this gives him time to commit this, and then what else is he lying about? So that was their, I guess, they're saying that's the reason why I was brought in. But what's interesting about that is that less than a week later, yeah, less than a week later, that same teacher got in contact with the precinct. Uh, I'm not sure if by phone and by letter, or just by letter, or just by phone, and said, I made a grave mistake. I was looking at the wrong date. No, he was here. He was in
Mm.
school. They never turned that over to us. That stayed hidden. The officers knew that right at the time, but they also knew that they coerced a child into confessing to the most unthinkable. And instead of having to answer the questions, what did you say and or do to this child to make him say he committed this crime? So they decided that they were going to keep that hidden. But in answer to your question, that was the reason why I was even tricked into being brought down
Yes.
to the precinct.
That's just demonic. Especially if a
Yeah.
week later, that's just evil. That's just evil. Uh how I know that you come from a Jamaican family.
Mhm.
How was your father at the time reacting to what's going on with you? And of course, losing your mother.
Um, I think about I think about him often, and I place myself in his shoes from the time that this happened. Um, and I do not know how that man endured that, and still had the strength to provide a defense for me to make sure I had at least a fair shake. He would not believe anything. He knew his son. Um, he knew I was innocent, and he gave every penny that he ever had to prove that, and died penniless as a result. For him, you know, I think sometimes I hurt even more than I do for my own self, because here it is, he had to provide a defense for his son when the world was saying that, you know, this young kid is an animal and needs to be off of the street. He still fought. He was ostracized by people in the neighborhood. He lost work as a result. And still, the house his wife was murdered in, he still had to deal with the reality of dealing with her, all of her affairs from work and everything else. It was a heavy burden for a man, especially a man of his age, you know. So um, I don't know how. I don't know how he did it, how he endured, but he did. And you know, the only thing that if I have to give an answer, it's just he knew the truth, um, and he was going to, you know, spend the rest of his life trying to prove it. So,
So tell me about this trial. Are you thinking, you're a child, you're a
uh,
child. Are you thinking, all right, well, the truth has to come out? I mean, so what happens during this trial? How do you feel like you were treated during the trial, and how did you feel when they sentenced you to 15 to life?
um, I thought by the time that I had gone to trial, that it was inevitable. Like we're really going to get to the bottom of this. We have people that are sitting here as a jury listening to this. These adults are they're not crazy. They're in their right state of mind. They're going to be able to see that I didn't commit this. That's what I'm saying in my 18-year-old head at the time. What I didn't know was that it was a concerted effort from not only the choices of the police during the time of my arrest, but the prosecutor as well. And there were a lot more things hidden. I didn't know that that trial was supposed to end the way in which it ended. They made sure they kept so much um, stuff for us and from us. And when I had gotten sentenced, um, I really, I really couldn't believe that after hearing all of the evidence, that rational minded adults would still sit and say, yeah, you know what, I think, matter of fact, I know he committed that. Like you can't see my dad inside this courtroom like every day. Like it was mind boggling to me. I couldn't process it, you know. At 18, I couldn't process
Do you think I know this is a hard question. I'm sure you probably weren't seeing the lens of race as a teenager,
it. Mhm.
but as an adult, as a grown man today and having went through this, do you think they would have did the same thing to, I don't know, a young Italian kid in Staten Island? I mean, or Long Island? Do you think they felt like he's vulnerable? We can target him because he's a young black boy from a Jamaican family?
It was definitely easier to target me. We, you know, as opposed to an Italian kid that lives, say, Sunset Park or someplace like
Right,
that.
right.
It was a little easier for me, given the temperament of the time. The 80s, I mean, as you know, the 80s was a very, very turbulent time in New York City. Our own people were afraid. They were being
Hmm.
made more afraid by everything that they were being bombarded with every day on the news.
That's right.
This is why it made it so easy for them to believe the story, because everything that they were hearing on the nightly news supported the fact that, okay, we're just living in strange times. Anything is possible.
Mm.
Um, they knew that, and people knew to play on that. That's why this happened to me January of '89, and a little over 90 days later, the same dog and pony show happens to five kids, 3, 4 miles down the road. So it was a theme. There are so many cases that you may never hear about.
That's right.
They didn't have the notoriety that my case had or that the Exonerated Five had. But however, some of them still served 20, 25 years and were paroled, and they feel, well, look, I'm just tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I'm home now. But that happened, those things that happened to me, the Exonerated Five, happened during that time more often than not. And that just was not by coincidence. So does that, is race an issue? Is it a factor? Of course it is. My mom was a registered nurse. My father was his own business owner doing interior, exterior decorating. He had a business from the 80s. He survived off of word of mouth. So
Mm.
when word of mouth says, well, his son did this to his wife, his business, everything fell. So if that was a white family, if that was any other family outside of a black family, there would have been every resource afforded to that 16-year-old child to make sure that we have someone answer for who did this to his mom, as opposed to saying, well, we think he did it first,
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. I mean, you look at the way oh my gosh, the young man that was killed, Yusef Hawkins, during the same
Right,
time. It took
right,
a while for those white children to be punished, for their crime. They did it, but it took a very long time for them to
right.
be punished. It didn't happen as quickly as you see these other cases.
Yeah.
So I want to get to your freedom, but I do want to ask you, and I know this is a tough question because
Mhm,
I'm assuming when you're behind bars, the only option is just to do it, just to do the time.
mhm.
But when you think about a child going behind bars, I guess 18 at this point, uh, how did you survive as far as your safety, not only from the inmates but the guards as well? Just the survival, because when you think of prison, you think of violence.
Yeah.
So how are you? And you, like you said, you were never in police custody before. This
Right.
isn't, you come from a two-family household, both your parents working, despite all the stupid stereotypes out there.
Mhm,
So how
mhm.
are you surviving and getting by day to day?
Uh, well, day to day getting by, for my mental well-being, knowing the truth, knowing that I'm really not supposed to be here. That keeps a fire in you. And having a amazing father. That was for my mental health to get through that. In terms of everything else, uh, as would be expected, I didn't grow up into the thing of being in the street and crime and petty crime. I didn't grow up that way. So not only is all of this brand new for me, but it's a shock because now we're saying, you think about it, we're talking about how out of control the streets are in the late 80s. But now you're going to take me and you're going to put me in a place where you put all of the worst of the worst from the city. So me coming in there as a 16-year-old, no knowledge of how this works, um, and coming in there literally with this bullseye on my back because of the nature of the crime. The first few months was, I mean, it was obviously, it was very, very hard. Um, but one of the things that happens is in prison, learn how to you learn how to swim. You learn how to, okay, well, I have to defend myself, or else this is something that's going to constantly go on. So you do that. You don't change who you are, but you learn um, how to survive kind of in that environment. Um, but the most of the time that I was there, I was always fighting to get out. So most of my time, my mind was consumed with that. Even after my appeals were exhausted, I would write to whatever innocence organization was of the day, trying to plead my case. So my mind was always kind of in trying to get out. Although I was there, I tried not to be present, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. So you're writing people constantly. You write the Innocence Project. They eventually respond and they work to get you free. You're released after nearly 20 years, September 1st, 2009. What was it that what were they able to prove? I mean, you laid out some things. They withheld evidence. The prosecution obviously had it out for you. But what are some of the things that the that New York had to say? This man must be let go.
Okay, so first, what I want to say, being released in 2009, that was only on parole. I still had not proven my innocence. It wouldn't be until another 10
Oh,
years that we would still keep fighting,
oh
because
wow.
that's how much stuff was hidden. That's how much we had to kind of piece this case back together. So this fight really goes from 1989 to 2019. I was just
Mm,
out on parole from 2009 until I was exonerated in January of 2019. So I was out here, working and trying to be a productive citizen and doing all of these things, still having this stigma on me at the same time, and having these law clinics work with me to try to, you know, get me cleared. So yeah, so it was the evidence to that, in answer to that, the evidence that we had was a week after they arrested me. My mom's car was stolen in the process of all of this stuff being done. A week later, they found her car. So the police who found the car contacted the officers um, and said, "We found this car that's in connection with this homicide." They went to go see who was in possession of the car, and it was our downstairs tenant. So at this point, they had a problem. They questioned somebody on the third, deemed him to be irrelevant, but they find him in the car a week later after you arrest the child. Um, Once we explored all of these things after looking at the evidence, we realized that uh, this person, along with the police, my arresting officers, they conspired together to make sure that this coerced confession stayed, and they kept him away, as far away from the case as possible. So these were some of the things that we used. The fact that um, the prosecutor said that they knew I was not in school, but she had the whole time that I was in school. Um, the fact that it was just not possible for me to actually commit the crime, and the person who actually committed the crime had a lengthy criminal history, you know, with knives and rape, and all of these things were going on. And my parents didn't know that we rented them the apartment maybe about a month and a half
mm,
prior.
mm.
So, you
And
know,
he passed away, correct?
yes, he did. Maybe a year after it happened, um, he was charged with grand larceny for having my mom's car. Um, he was ROR'd after that, although he was on parole supervision. But he was ROR'd, and I believe maybe later that year or the year following, early, he was murdered.
Wow. So basically, your mother was murdered by a tenant in the home.
Yeah,
Uh, wow. And they basically more or less knew he was the prime suspect, but they ignored it. It's just so crazy. It appears that they never want to fess up. You know,
right.
a mistake is made. You could correct this real easy. You could
Yeah.
save lives really easy. You could save time really easy, but they don't want to fess up. Were when did your father pass away?
2005, May 20th.
Oh, so he wasn't able to see you as a free man.
No,
Um,
he didn't get a chance to see me come out in 2009, and he definitely didn't get a chance to see me exonerated in 2019. Um, I went, I think when he went as far as he could. Um, one of the things that people don't know is that my father was almost 50 years older than I was. So when this happened, this is relatively an elderly man, and he had all of these burdens to deal with. So when he died, he was 83. So
Wow, he was a
yeah,
warrior, man. A
yeah, that's
warrior.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you lost your father behind bars. I think
yeah.
that's got to be one of the greatest tragedies that this system does is that losing a parent behind bars. And yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So you're finally exonerated in 2019.
Hmm.
And here's what really trips me out is that the state of New York has given you no compensation. I can't even. And what's crazy about the exonerated five is that they the New York Supreme Court gave them a settlement, but
Right.
then Bloomberg didn't want to give it to them, and then they had to fight for that. But Bloomberg said no. De Blasio comes in and does give them the settlement that they deserve. But here we
Yeah.
have a case like yours. I cannot believe no compensation. Uh, I
Well,
don't even know. Go
well,
ahead. I'm
well, you
sorry.
know what? No, no, no. No, it's a great question. I think a lot of times there never wants to be this acknowledgement. And in some people's mind, to compensate is to say that, we did something wrong. Um, in some people's mind, they feel like, we have done nothing wrong. And I think that that's something that as a society we have to take a close look at when we feel like, you know, that's rational thinking. Like, you know, you did this. We know this is what you did.
You're
Um,
exonerated.
right. We know. So I mean, what is the issue? A lot of times, there are a lot of things we know. Like for example, one of the reasons why the officers who arrested me wanted to make sure that it never came to light is because sometime in 1988, in the fall, about October, somewhere there about, they did the same thing to two other kids. And that was, that case ended up getting dismissed, but they ended up going through the whole process of having to almost go to a trial for something that they didn't do. Um, there was a story done, I believe, February of this year in the Times, where they found out not only was it that case, but probably 31 cases of similar conduct. So, they didn't want this to be a case that would come back because there was so much media coverage with the case. So they had to make sure that all of this stuff stuck. And that was their mission. And the prosecutor, the assistant district attorney at that time, she was on board with making sure that all of this stuff never saw the light of day. So,
And what pisses me off is that they do this. Folks are
mm,
exonerated, and a few of the folks from the exonerated five case, they're still at the DA's office. What's her name? Linda Fairstein.
right.
She resigned from some positions or whatever, but there's no punishment for these prosecutors or these DAs or these. It's insane to me. Like
Mm,
people are going to keep on if they can get away with it, they're going to keep on doing it.
right.
It just blows my mind. I
Well,
can't.
again, when it happens, we have to, the adults among us who we see what's happening. Um, we have to say, okay, well, it has to come a point where we have to raise Cain about it. We have to put our foot down. Again, as I said, this happened to us in '89 because they had us as a people so paralyzed with fear that
Hmm.
anything you said about your, black boys, it was like, okay, well, that has to be true. Um, we have to be the ones to say, no, 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 wait a minute, because if we don't do that, we'll be having these discussions 15, 20, 20 years from now from someone who was just exonerated last year. We'll be doing the same thing 20 years from now. So we have an opportunity to raise Cain at this point and say, wait, no, no more. We can't
Yeah.
keep doing this, and we can't keep allowing that to happen. So, yeah.
Where are you today? Where are you today? How I know it must be trauma,
Hmm.
PTSD. You've been out since 2009. Again, you were paroled, but you weren't exonerated until 2019. So,
Hmm.
where are you? How's your soul? How's your spirit? How are you getting by today?
Good. I am. I really am. A lot of times I really wish my dad could, see a bit of this, because it's discussions that we used to have in every visit room, when he used to come up. Um, my my state of mind, I think doing things like this affords me the opportunity to talk about it, as opposed to when I was inside, there was no one to talk to about it. It's like, you're innocent, but inside there's no one to talk to about that. Everyone believes everybody there is guilty. So your truths, you kept them bottled up. To be fortunate enough to be here, healthy mind, healthy body. Um, this is what gives me peace of mind, to be able to do this, to be able to reach out to people and let them know what happened to me, and if we don't do something, what's going to continue to happen tomorrow and possibly to one of your family members. So, I'm still doing music. I just graduated from audio engineering school, so I'm thankful for that.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So, um I'm just living, man, one day at a time, and I know that these traumas are there. They don't go anywhere. But for me, it's what you do with them. So the traumas, the things that have happened to me, I have to have it work for me in some way, shape, form, or fashion. It doesn't mean that I stop being angry and so frustrated with what they did. Um, those are the things that keeps a fire in me, to talk to people, to reach out to people, to make sure it doesn't happen again. So, all of that to say, I'm good, man. I'm in a good state of mind. I had my father for the 13 years of the ordeal, and he gave me some priceless pieces of wisdom in terms of just getting through things and growing, regardless of what your circumstances may be. So you never know.
Before you go, I do want to take a moment to make sure that we honor your mother. Am I saying it right? Kiza Burton, was that her
Keziah,
name? Kazaya,
Keziah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Kazaya Burton, 59 years old. She was a registered nurse. Can you just tell me about your mom, about the kind of mom and woman that she was?
I was I'm her only son, so I was very spoiled. I had everything growing up. She was very firm, very serious, very serious about academics. She was very serious about excelling and not wasting time. She came here. Her and my dad were married in England in '70 and came here shortly after. She came here with a plan. She came here, to do things. When she passed, she was a homeowner. She had been on our job for a while, and so um, she was just a very, very warm spirit, and just wanting to have the best for her son, and the best experience while here, making the best out of everything. She and they did everything right when one is coming to this country. They didn't miss a step. So, um, beautiful, warm spirit, beautiful, warm spirit.
Well, shout out to your parents. They obviously raised a really good son, and to
Thank you.
be able to do that, especially in the '80s in New York, to be able to own property, and it's
Yeah,
just really phenomenal. So I want to thank you for sharing your story. These stories are so important.
they are.
I began this series about a year ago, and I could pretty much do it for the next 5 years because I mean, for
Good.
the next 20 years, there's so many stories. It's
Yeah,
endless. It's
yeah,
just endless. And I want to thank you. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we go?
yeah. One of the most important things about doing these kind of things is that we are made aware that this happened. Also, when you look at my case, when you look at other cases, you'll see certain similarities, with things that are happening now. If you're listening to these things, if you're into listening to them, um, if you're getting inspired, man, there has to be a call to action, because if there is no call to action for you to do, to do something, this is just going to repeat, and it would just be a show that we're watching over and over and over again. And as we're watching this show, we as a people will be losing more and more ground. So, let these things serve to be a call to action for all of you. Again, as I said, 30 plus years ago, it was me and my parents, my family was impacted by it. The way things are looking now, looking at New York, it's going back to the way it was in the 80s. Tomorrow, it could be someone that's, near and dear to you. So please, don't just hear the words. Say, okay, well, look, there has to be something that we can do. Because if we don't stand up, and provide answers, they will provide the answers for you, and I assure you, you will not like them.
And you can always get involved with your local Innocence Project. I mean, and also, I think
Yes.
it's really important that when you see these headlines, like with the Exonerated Five and yourself,
Yeah.
uh, you know, don't jump on it immediately and think, oh, this must make sense because somebody confessed. It's a lot more complicated than that. Because like you said, with the Exonerated Five, they were treated terribly by their
Yeah.
community even when they were released. So it's so much. I do want to say though, I know times are tough, but
Mhm.
because you have not been compensated by New York, your Cash App is $HUWE Burton BURTON. If y'all can help out, whatever the case may be, feel free. Again, Cash App $HUWE Burton BURTON. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
story. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you the best of luck moving forward.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.